Hello, and welcome to another vlog. I hope all of my Canadian friends enjoyed their Thanksgiving. We have a lot to be thankful for as Canadians. This week's topic is advocacy. I'm going to be releasing a video on Thursday in which I talk about what advocacy is, how it works, and why it's important. So subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to see that video. But today, what I want to talk about is my experiences with advocacy, and I also want to talk a little bit about what the process of advocacy is and what some tips for advocacy are. So I myself have been advocating for people with disabilities for quite some time. I do consider myself to be a male feminist, but I spend most of my time advocating for people with disabilities because I myself am a person with a disability. So for the past 10 or more years, I've been doing a lot of community service for Muscular Dystrophy Canada. I have Duchenne muscular dystrophy, so I'm very involved in the organization. I've helped with fundraising and advocacy and attended a lot of conferences and things like that through Muscular Dystrophy Canada. Last year, I started a petition to the federal government in which I was urging them to implement a national assistance program for Canadians with disabilities so that they could access the services and equipment that they need to live functional lives. I've talked a bit about that in previous vlogs. I've attended a number of consultations, including the National Youth Disability Forum in Ottawa in November 2016, to help the Canadian government develop the Canadians with Disabilities Act, which they're in the process of legislating now. They haven't actually developed a bill yet, but once the bill is written, they will send it to Parliament and start talking about it. So that's expected in the spring. And of course, I started a YouTube series to educate people about disabilities. That's important because, in my personal opinion, I view education as step one in advocacy. So those are some of the things that I've done in terms of advocacy. And I'm always looking for new ways to help improve the way of life for people with disabilities, new ways to create change. So I want to use these experiences to talk a little bit about the process of advocacy and what some tips for advocacy are. And this is in no way a definitive guide, but I hope that it will be helpful to anyone who's maybe considering doing advocacy but doesn't know where to start. So what is the process of advocacy? I personally have divided it into 7 steps just based on my personal experience. So step 1 is to pick an important cause. So what is it that you want to advocate for? You advocating for gender equality, racial equality, the rights of persons with disabilities, gay rights, whatever you're advocating for, you need to pick that cause. Now, let's say the cause that you pick is advocating for the rights of people with disabilities. That's a very broad cause. So step 2 is to narrow it down to a specific issue. So if you're advocating for people with disabilities, maybe the issue that you want to fight for is helping them to access the services and equipment that they need to live independently. So step 2 is to narrow it down. Now, once you've chosen a specific issue, you need to move on to step 3, in which you research the issue. You need to know everything that there is about this issue. So you need to know what services are available for people with disabilities in your area, what services are available in other jurisdictions, and everything else that there is to know about this issue. And I'm using the fighting for the rights of people with disabilities as a specific example, but this really applies to anything. So once you understand the ins and outs of that particular issue, now you need to develop a plan. You need to know exactly what steps you need to take to make this change a reality. So in terms of advocating for people with disabilities, you need to know what services can be put in place to help people with disabilities live independently, and you need to know what steps you need to take to implement those services. So you need to develop a plan, and you should have a plan and a backup plan and a backup plan for your backup plan, and so on and so forth. Because you need to know all the barriers that you're going to face and how you're going to overcome them. And you have to be prepared because your adversaries, because there is a good chance that you will have adversaries, are going to try and do everything in their power to stop you, and you need to be one step ahead of them. So now that you've picked an issue and you understand that issue and you have a plan, now it's time to move on to step 5, which is to educate people about your cause. So you need to get the word out. Why is your cause important, and why should people support it? Like I said, I view education as the first step towards advocacy. So maybe you could do that in the form of a YouTube video. Maybe you could hand out information, post things on social media, have an event where you meet and greet with people. Just different ways to educate people about your cause. And then that brings us to step 6, where you actually have to gather support for your cause. So you need to get people to actually join the fight. And once you've gathered some support, now you're ready to actually fight for change. And you're going to do this using social, economic, political, or legal means. So you could do it with a march, you could do a fundraiser, you could talk to your member of parliament, or if you're in the States, your representative or your senator. You could go through maybe a legal aid department. There's a number of different ways to do it. It all depends on what your specific cause is and how you're advocating for it. That'll determine what your channels of advocacy are going to be. So obviously that's a long process. There's 7 steps. To recap, it's pick an important cause, identify a specific issue, research the issue, develop a plan, educate people about your cause, gather support for your cause, and then fight for change using social, political, economic, or legal means. That's a long process, and that can seem overwhelming. And it takes a long time. So I'm going to provide some tips on how you can make that advocacy a little bit more successful. So as I mentioned when going through the process of advocacy, you need to do a lot of research, because you need to know everything there is to know about the issue, and you need to have a plan so that you know exactly how you're going to accomplish your goal. If you don't do those 2 things, you're not going to be successful, because your adversaries are going to walk right over you, you're going to run into barriers, and you're not going to be able to overcome them. But if you do that research and you have a plan, you will be able to overcome those barriers. So once you've done that, you need to be patient. Change does not happen overnight. It can take months, but more often than not, it takes years. So you need to be patient. And that's not me trying to deter you from advocating. It's just me trying to be brutally honest that it takes a long time. So you need to be patient. You also need to be persistent. There's the old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Unless you keep after someone and keep asking them, they're not going to follow through with what you want them to do. Because they're probably busy, they might forget, maybe they'll come up with excuses why they can't do it. So you need to be persistent so that you can get them to do what you need them to do. Because when you're advocating, you can't do everything. You're going to rely on other people to help you fulfill your cause. And that's where a plan comes in, so that you know who you can rely on to accomplish your goals. And of course, you need to be diplomatic. If you're aggressive or assertive, it's going to end the conversation. People are programmed to avoid confrontation. So if you get confrontational, people are going to avoid you, and the conversation's going to end, and you're not going to get anywhere. So it's important to be diplomatic. And of course, you need to never give up. Advocacy takes a long time. It can be a difficult process, and you need to be in it for the long haul. So don't give up. So those are my tips for advocacy. Like I said, this is in no way a definitive guide, but I hope that this will help anyone who's thinking about doing some advocacy themselves. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll see you on Thursday when I release this week's next video. Thanks for watching.